From 1347 to 1353, the Black Death took 25 million lives in Europe, reducing the population by as much as 80% in certain cities. The plague came quickly and without mercy, but for those who lived through it, life went on in a world that had changed completely. After the Black Death swept through Europe, this is what unfolded. Hi. Just a quick note before we begin. If you enjoy these regularly, please hit like or subscribe. I'm curious about where everyone is, so please share your city in the current time. It's interesting to imagine that some of you are enjoying breakfast in London while I'm here recording this at night in the States. Okay, let's return to Europe after the Black Death. Believe me, it's going to be an exciting journey. First, find a cozy spot, honestly, move those pillows around, grab that blanket. Because where we're headed, you'll want to feel snug. You awaken to a world of shadows. The straw mattress under you feels wet from the moisture that comes through the walls of your cozy little home. For a brief instant, everything seems just right. The well-known rough feel on your skin, the scent of smoke lingering from the fire we had last night. A rooster crows in the distance. Then it dawns on you, the quiet. Silence fills the street. There is no sound of the blacksmith's hammer striking metal. No sounds of children, whether joyful or upset. It's simply nothing. You might be thinking, how strange could this actually be? Picture your neighborhood mostly deserted, with only about one house in 5 still standing. This is what we're discussing. You get up and place your feet on the hard, cool dirt floor. Not like a cozy carpet or wooden floors you have now. Medieval floors were often just packed dirt, occasionally topped with rushes or straw that would remain in place for months. Yeah, it wasn't the best when it came to cleanliness, and that didn't do any favors during the plague. I spent a lot of time looking into how people slept in medieval times for this. It seems that many people used basic straw mattresses, usually sharing them with their entire family and sometimes even animals for extra warmth. Confidentiality. They weren't used to this idea, and these weren't memory foam mattresses. Just bags filled with whatever was on hand, straw, hay, and occasionally wool if you were fortunate. As you walk outside, the morning sun brightens a village that has changed. The sunrise, painted in shades of blood red, seems fitting in a way. At the end of the lane, the baker's shop, which used to fill the air with the scent of warm bread, has its door ajar. It's been weeks since anyone was there. The baker and his whole family have disappeared. In your mind, you're wondering, is there anyone still around? Your logical mind understands that there are others out there, yet your feelings make you feel completely isolated right now. You walk to the heart of the village. Before the plague, this place would have been full of life and movement. Merchants preparing for the day, villagers fetching water from the well, church bells inviting everyone to morning prayer. The well stands still, the church door is shut, and the only sounds are the occasional bird and the wind whispering through vacant market stalls. Hello, you shout, your voice feeling strange even to your own ears. Is someone there? A shuffle comes from a nearby house, and an old woman steps out, her face thin and weary. She holds a tiny bunch of herbs, rosemary, thyme, lavender, pressed close to her nose. Stay back, she says, looking at you carefully. Do you have the illness? People referred to it as the sickness. Some referred to it as the great mortality, the pestilence, or the great plague. The phrase Black Death was not actually coined until many years later. No, you reply, my family. But the words just won't come out. She nods, grasping the meaning silently. People thought her bundle of herbs could shield them from bad air, based on the idea that disease spread through unpleasant odors. They brought along fragrant herbs or flowers to help with it, totally ineffective against the real problem, which was bacteria from fleas on rats, but they were unaware of that. The priest is gathering the deceased, she states plainly. They are digging a hole outside the village, a large grave. The usual burial practices had fallen apart entirely. A Florentine chronicler noted that burial shrouds increased in price by up to 10 times their usual cost. Even then, there weren't enough people to dig each grave. Bodies were stacked in large pits, usually without much ceremony. You walk along the path, she points out, and as you crest the hill, you spot a small group of people. Some are digging, while others are pulling wrapped bodies. The scent reaches you even from a distance. That familiar, sweet smell of decay dots stick around, because this is where things get strange. The one overseeing this dark task isn't the priest as you might think, but a nearby butcher. The priest passed away 2 weeks ago. The butcher, skilled in working with meat, has naturally taken on the role of the undertaker. He calls for help when he spots you. It's not a greeting or a friendly start, just a request for work. In a world where maybe 2/3 of your community is gone, every pair of hands that remains is valuable. Imagine this. By mid-1349, in places like Florence, Italy, so many people had passed away that those who remained couldn't manage the burial requirements. They would place bodies in deep trenches, cover them lightly with soil, then add another layer of bodies, followed by more soil, and repeat the process. Some of these mass graves have been found long after they were created, often during building work, showing how efficiently people were buried during the plague. The next few hours pass quickly as you assist in moving the deceased. These are familiar faces: the miller's wife, the cooper's son, a whole family from the outskirts of the village. Their bodies are swollen and changed in color, many showing the distinctive dark swellings in the armpits or groin that led to one of the plague's names, the pestilential buboes. Last week, the butcher says, as you take a moment to breathe, a man from the nearby village came searching for food, claiming there wasn't a single person left there. All gone or escaped. Picture that reality for a moment. Whole villages simply vanished. Archaeological findings have shown that this took place. We discovered old medieval villages that seem to have been left behind quickly during the plague years. By noon, your stomach is rumbling. You notice that you haven't had anything to eat since yesterday. Now that the baker is gone, where will we get our bread? With many farmers gone, who will gather the crops? This is the place where the first big change in the economy started. Food prices shot up right after the plague struck an area. A Florentine chronicler I mentioned noted that food for the sick, like cakes and sugar, became very expensive. Chicken and other poultry were really pricey. You walk towards the old marketplace, looking for anyone who might be selling food. Anything you can eat. There's one vendor, an elderly man with a cart holding some shriveled vegetables and a small bag of grain. A few survivors gather around, debating the prices. 6 pennies for a loaf of bread. A woman yells, "That's stealing." The vendor responds with a chill, saying, "Take it or starve." The fields are empty, with no one to tend to them. He's correct. Fields stand empty, plants wilting in the earth. Farmers were gone, either having died or escaped, and the fields were left without care. Pets roamed around without anyone looking after them. In certain areas, sheep and cattle perished in the fields due to a lack of herders. All right, imagine this. You're there, observing as people bicker over the final bits of food, when out of nowhere, the church bell chimes. Everyone comes to a standstill. This is not the usual call to prayer. It's unpredictable. In need of help. You all hurry to the church, where one survivor is desperately tugging on the bell rope. He calls out to the riders. A sense of unease spreads among the small group as they face the east. Riders can represent various things, and none of them are positive. Thieves preying on vulnerable villages. Officials are arriving to gather taxes, even with the destruction around. Or even worse, people escaping from another plague outbreak, possibly bringing the illness back to your village. A few people discuss their options. Some choose to stay out of sight, while others prefer to hold their position. In your mind, you're shouting, "This is how it ends for me," either by bandits or by disease. Before a decision is reached, the riders show up at the edge of the village. The Lord's son has come back from a nearby town, bringing along a few armed men and a wagon filled with supplies. His father, the local lord, passed away from the plague a few months back. "I've brought grain," he calls out, his voice echoing through the square, "and I'm looking for workers for the fields. I'll pay double what you usually earn. This moment right here is a turning point in history." Before the Black Death, peasants were tied to the land, working for whatever the Lord chose to give them, which was usually very little dot with so many gone. The remaining workers found themselves in a strong position. With fewer workers available, employees were able to ask for more pay and improved working conditions. The young lord says, "I need 10 strong individuals to get the fields ready for planting," offering 10 pennies a day for each. A soft whisper spreads among the people. 10 pennies is an unusual pay. Before the plague, you could earn 2 pennies for a whole day of hard work. "What about our own lands?" A voice calls out, "We have fields as well, if we can get some seed." The Lord pauses, weighing his options. "Take care of my fields first, and I'll make sure you get seed for yours." Everyone seems to hold back. The previous way would have required instant compliance, but things are different now. At last, a small step forward, accepting the terms. Some people hesitate, unsure about the promises made. What about this negotiation? This is not something that would have occurred in the past. The large number of deaths had shaken up the whole social order after the plague ended. A chronicler noted that anyone who managed to obtain any kind of cloth or the materials to create it became wealthy. In the same way, survivors received belongings and riches from their past family members. A person who once had nothing might suddenly become quite wealthy. You spend the afternoon handing out grain from the Lord's wagon. As the sun starts to go down, you walk back to your quiet house. The quiet feels unsettling, yet there's a new feeling. A curious hint of opportunity. Your parents' home is now your home. The tools your dad made are now yours to use or sell. The little piece of land, though modest, is still more than you ever thought you would have got. As you start a cozy fire in the hearth, you think about the day. A day ago, you felt a wave of sadness and disbelief. There's still sadness that may linger for years, perhaps forever. But there's also an unexpected chance ahead. Here's the surprise. The Black Death was one of the worst disasters in human history, taking millions of lives and leaving survivors deeply affected. However, it also unintentionally opened doors to new opportunities that might not have come about otherwise. Land was now open for use, pay went up, and people could move up in society like never before. Things didn't become suddenly great. They just weren't. The mental burden was heavy. Petrarch, an Italian poet who lived during the plague, wrote to his brother, "I wish, my brother, that I had never been born, or at least had died before these times." He wondered if people in the future, like us, could truly grasp their pain. You recline on your straw mattress, a stark contrast to your cozy bed now, as the stillness of the house surrounds you. Before the plague, you would have been surrounded by parents, siblings, and perhaps grandparents or other family members. It's only you now. As you gently fall asleep, you think about what tomorrow might hold in this quieter, more open world. Will more survivors come out from their hiding places? Will the crops get planted on time? Is the plague going to come back? In contrast to your cozy bedroom tonight, filled with safety and warmth, a medieval survivor of the Black Death would drift off to sleep each night, facing deep uncertainty about what tomorrow might bring. Even with that uncertainty, life would go on, and as we'll discover tomorrow, the social fabric of Europe wouldn't just bounce back, it would change entirely. The sadness and shock of many people dying would slowly turn into something surprising, a social change that would help shape the modern world. But that's a tale for another part of our journey. The second morning after the plague has a unique feeling. There's a peculiar feeling in the air. Not quite hope, but a sense of change. You go outside and notice there are a few more people in the village square compared to yesterday. Some faces you know, while others are newcomers from nearby places. The last of their kind. The Lord's Son is gathering workers for the fields. Still promising those amazing wages, but today something surprising is taking place. A sharply dressed stranger is raising his voice at him. Text. The stranger claims this is their land now. Brandishing a piece of parchment. My cousin passed away without any heirs, and I have the legal claim. The Son of the Lord appears prepared to unsheath his sword. Your cousin used to rent from my dad, and this land is part of my family's property. Here we notice another strange effect of the plague. Property disputes were all around. When people passed away without obvious heirs, distant relatives appeared to make claims. Court records from the years following the plague are filled with inheritance cases. Picture a family tree being trimmed so much that branches thought to be unimportant suddenly find themselves with legal rights. A group of people comes together to see the disagreement. Beside you, an elderly farmer lets a glob of spit hit the earth. Let them argue about it. So, who is responsible for planting the crops? We'll all be hungry by winter. He's correct, as the nobles and new merchants argued about ownership. Essential issues like food production were left uncertain. You might own all the land in England, but if no one is planting crops, what's the point? You used to work for the old lord, didn't you? Asks a woman next to you, a child holding onto her skirt. Are you going to work the fields again? You pause. Before the plague, you wouldn't have had any options. But now, there are choices. 10 pennies is a fair wage, you suggest? Feeling things out, the tanner in the nearby village is offering 12. She says casually, for anyone who can assist him with processing hides. He lost his 2 apprentices. All right, capture this moment right now. This chat, this easy talk about looking for better pay, this was groundbreaking. Before the plague, many peasants were connected to the land by serfdom or other duties. The thought of simply leaving to find a job that pays more? Hard to picture for many. However, the huge lack of workers altered everything. At the same time, the Lord and the newcomer continue to bicker. The Lord's Son finally exclaims, "We'll bring this to the king's court." A person chuckles. The king's court is in disarray. Half the judges are gone, and the others have left London. Who will listen to your case? He makes a good observation. The legal system, similar to other things, had fallen apart in many places. During this time, records indicate that court sessions were often canceled, postponed for long stretches, or held with whoever was around instead of the right officials. You choose to follow the woman with the child, intrigued by the tanner who is offering better pay. As you stroll through the village, you see something unusual, doors ajar on a number of houses. The woman explains, following your gaze, that people are simply taking what they need. There's nobody around to take it. In an empty house, you see someone putting cooking pots, tools, and clothing into a sack. It's not really stealing. It feels more like sharing what's left behind. Who was there to decide who owned what? This large transfer of wealth wasn't limited to minor possessions. In Florence, a historian remembered that after the plague ended, anyone who managed to find any type of cloth or the materials to create it became wealthy. In the same way, those who survived received belongings and riches from their family members who had passed away. A person who once had nothing might suddenly become quite wealthy. The woman guides you to a crossroads where a small group has come together around a simple market. Just a few blankets laid out with items, but these aren't your typical market finds. There are shiny silver cups, Soft fine linen, handy tools, beautiful jewelry, and items that once seemed out of reach. You wonder where all this came from, even though you have an idea. The dead have no use for silver. The man sitting cross-legged behind the display says he has 2 fingers gone and hands that are rough from a lifetime of working the fields. I discovered an entire chest of this stuff in my master's house after everyone there passed away. I thought I'd swap it for items I can really use. You extend your hand towards a silver goblet, but pause for a moment. It seems often a way to gain from so much loss. The peasant sees you pause. Oh, look, he says in a straightforward way, my whole family's gone. Finished them all in just 3 days. I know you expected something different, but since we have this cup, we might as well put it to good use. I've looked at stories from people who survived the plague, and this straightforward method was often used. Not due to a lack of compassion, but because the overwhelming number of deaths made it hard to mourn for long. Life had to go on. You swap a small knife you've had for years for a wool blanket that used to cost a month's pay. While you fold it, the woman gently places her hand on your arm. The tanner is down this path, she says, pointing ahead, if you want to know more. The tanyard is located at the border of a nearby village, with a strong scent of urine, lime, and animal hides reaching you well before you catch sight of it. Tanning was one of those essential yet quite unpleasant medieval jobs that no one wanted to be close to. The method involved using urine and animal brains to treat hides. Yes, it looks quite delicious, I can see that. The tanner is a big man with thick forearms that resemble tree trunks. He glances up from his work on the hide as you come closer. Are you here to work? He asks directly. Perhaps you respond carefully. I heard you're giving out 12 pennies. He says it's 15 now. Another worker left yesterday, not because of the plague. He grabbed some silver he discovered in an old house and is heading to London to see what fortune awaits him. The tanner lets out a spit. Fool. Cities were affected more than any other place. He was correct about that. In cities, where people lived closely together, death rates could reach as high as 50 to 60% of the population. On the other hand, some remote rural areas saw only a third of their population decline. It was a bit of a relief, but it indicated various ways to recover. You confess that you've never tanned before. The tanner lifts his shoulders slightly. Are you able to follow directions? Not worried about a little chaos. That's everything I require. I can show the others how it's done. Just as you're about to respond, a stir arises from the village center, ringing bells, voices calling out. You and the tanner look at each other and quickly move toward the noise. A rider on a sweaty horse has come, carrying news from the closest big town. A group of people comes together as he drinks water from a prophet cup. The messenger announces that all debts to the church are forgiven by the bishops. It's a sign of God's kindness for those who remain. Whispers flow among the people. The church forgiving debts was significant. Many farmers were always in debt to churches that owned large areas of land. What about the king's taxes? A voice calls out. The rider chuckles, a rough noise. The king's collectors attempted to reach 3 villages. 2 were chased away with pitchforks. The third one hasn't been spotted since. This actually happened, just so you know, in many places. Tax collection stopped entirely. Some collectors faced an attack. Some discovered deserted towns with no one around to collect taxes. Records indicate that royal revenues dropped significantly. What about the guilds in town? Inquires of an older gentleman, probably a skilled artisan. Are they accepting new members? Before the plague, craft guilds were groups that managed trades such as baking, metalworking, or weaving, and they were known for being very selective. They restricted membership to safeguard their control and maintain elevated prices. The messenger replies that the Weavers Guild is open to anyone who can use a loom. Many of their members are gone, and they still have orders waiting from before the onus. This was really important. Guilds that used to need 7-year apprenticeships and family ties were now eager for anyone with simple skills. Opportunities for social mobility that once seemed out of reach were now available for everyone. You glance at the tanner, thinking about his proposal. 15 pennies a day adds up to more than what you would have made in 2 weeks of field work before. Yet the scent, the clutter, the tanner says, noticing your look. Give it a go for 3 days. If you don't like it, I'll compensate you for your time, and there will be no hard feelings. A woman pushes through the crowd, making her way directly to the tanner. Master Fuller, she says, I'm here regarding the work. The tanner seems taken aback. What about you? But you're a lady? Yes, she cuts in. My husband was your best worker before he passed away. I assisted him for many years. I understand the process just like anyone else. All right, so there's another big change in society taking place. Women are stepping into trades that were once mostly for men, and with a shortage of workers, the barriers between genders are beginning to break down in some fields, not in every place. Not entirely, but just enough that women discovered chances that once seemed impossible. The tanner rubs his chin thoughtfully. Have you ever really done the tough scraping? What about the lifting? I've had 4 kids, she says flatly. I can manage lifting a hide. A small group of people in the crowd laugh softly. The tanner lifts his shoulders slightly. 15 pennies, just like everyone else. She replies, 20. The audience falls quiet. A woman discussing her pay like this? Never before seen. The tanner lets out a hearty laugh. 18 and not a cent extra, and you train this one as well. He points at you with his thumb. All set, she replies confidently. Just like that. You're now learning the art of tanning from a woman, earning more than what skilled craftsmen did before the plague. The old world was really gone. As the crowd breaks apart, the messenger keeps passing along the news. Towns are inviting skilled workers to become citizens if they choose to live there. Landlords are lowering rents to retain tenants. Merchants who used to sell only luxury items for the rich are now offering their goods to anyone with money. You walk behind your new mentor to the tannery, doing your best to overlook the scent that will soon be a part of your everyday life. I'm Agnes, she says, glancing back. What's the reason for tanning, you wonder? You might want to consider a cleaner option. Agnes walks beside you at a slower pace. She speaks softly. My husband didn't die of the plague. 2 years ago, a cart ran over him, leaving me with 4 kids and no money. I asked the tanner if I could work for him. He declined, stating it wasn't a task for women. I did laundry instead, just managing to keep us fed. She gives a faint smile. Now he relies on me more than I rely on him. It's amusing how things shift. This shows a different aspect of the economy after the plague. People who were previously overlooked, like women, lower-class workers, and sometimes the disabled, suddenly saw their skills appreciated. Not because of kindness or social change, but simply because they were needed. At the tannery, Agnes gets right to work. She hands you a dirty apron and gestures toward a stack of rawhides. To start, she uses a curved knife to carefully remove all the flesh and fat. If there's too much left on, the hide decays. If too much is removed, the leather becomes fragile. The result is unpleasant work. In just an hour, you're surrounded by animal parts. Your arms feel sore, and the odor has seeped into everything. There's a unique pleasure in watching the change, taking a raw, bloody hide and starting to turn it into something practical. By noon, your stomach is rumbling, even with the bad smell around. Agnes calls for a break, and you both wash your hands in a bucket before enjoying a meal of bread and cheese that the tanner offers. Agnes notes your surprise. saying he never fed the workers before. Food prices have tripled, and he realizes we could leave and find jobs somewhere else by the end of the day. This was a piece of the new world. Employers needed to provide not only higher pay, but also improve conditions to draw in and retain workers. In some Italian cities, laws were created to limit the luxury of workers' treatment, aiming to stop employers from competing and raising costs. Overwhelming dot, where will you be sleeping? Agnes inquires while you munch. You notice that it hasn't crossed your mind. Your family home is just in the village next door. Walking back and forth every day could happen, but it would be exhausting. He has a shed in the backyard. Agnes points to a little building. It was shared by 2 workers. It's empty now, just a little, but it provides shelter. After lunch, she guides you through the next steps in the process, soaking the scraped hides in a mix of water, lime, and urine. Yes, real human urine, gathered in large containers. Medieval tanning was quite a tough process. Agnes says with a serious expression, pointing to a bucket in the corner of the shed, that everyone contributes. By evening, your body feels sore from the new work, and you smell so strong that you wonder if you'll ever smell fresh again. As the tanner hands you your first day's pay. 80 shiny silver coins sparkle in the dimming light, and you suddenly feel a sense of independence. Before the plague, your journey would have been clear. You would have toiled in the same fields as your family before you, given much of your harvest to the Lord, and survived or perished by circumstances you couldn't change. With those coins resting in your hand, you have options. Picture the silver goblet at the little market stall. With just a week's pay, you could get wonderful things for yourself. What happens next? Silver isn't something you can eat or use to keep warm. As the evening light fades, you stroll back to the market and exchange one of your valuable coins for a sturdy candle, a small loaf of bread, and a chunk of hard cheese. Useful items, essentials for survival. In the borrowed shed that night, lit by candlelight, you enjoy a meal that's better than what you'd have on an ordinary day before the plague. Tomorrow, you can collect more coins. You might save them or trade them for tools or clothes. The future is unclear, but it seems like this time the decision is yours to take. As you settle into sleep on a bed of straw that feels surprisingly similar to your mattress at home, a thought comes to you. In this unusual new world where death has claimed so much, it has also oddly returned something. A sense of freedom while you relax in your cozy bedroom tonight, feeling safe and at ease. Medieval survivors like you encountered a world where everything they once knew had shifted dramatically. Scary, sure, but also brimming with opportunities that would have seemed impossible just a few months ago. As the social fabric slowly came apart and then started to come together again in the months ahead, new possibilities emerged, creating both chances and challenges as Europe moved toward a new normal after the plagues. Impact: 3 months into your new life as a tanner's apprentice, and the smell doesn't even bother you anymore. Agnes says that's how she knows you've joined their ranks, when you no longer notice the smell. People in the village still step aside when you walk by. It's better than perfume these days, Agnes jokes, as you both work on scraping hides under the warm summer sun. No one wants to come near enough to catch the plague from you. She is somewhat correct. People have come up with unusual thoughts about how the disease spreads. Some think it moves through unpleasant odors, known as the miasma theory. Some believe it's in appearances or breath, but the smell of the tannery may be off-putting, yet it certainly keeps people away. The tannery is bustling with activity. With many people gone, there are now more cattle for each survivor, leading to an increase in hides to process. Your hands are rougher, your arms are tougher, and your wallet is fuller. Master Fuller hears a call from the road. A neatly dressed man rides a horse, looking like a merchant, and holds a handkerchief to his nose. The tanner stands up straight, cleaning his hands on his apron. I need 50 quality leather hides by the end of the month for saddles and harnesses for the king's horses for his campaign in France. And there's good money for those who can provide them. 50. The tanner rubs his chin thoughtfully. That's quite a challenge. Now there are only 4 workers. The merchant looks at you and Agnes. 4. Are you counting the woman? Agnes stands up, holding a knife. Last week, I completed more hides than both men together. I've come across stories of women who took on roles usually held by men during the labor shortage and encountered this kind of doubt, but the economic situation eventually made even the most traditional thinkers change their views. The merchant seems unsure, yet he turns back to Master Fuller 50 skins. 6 shillings each? The tanner almost can't breathe. 6. The price was 4 before the death. Accept it or walk away. Every tanner within a 20-mile radius is receiving the same offer. Once the merchant departs, Master Fuller gathers everyone around. There are 4 of you now. You, Agnes, a teenage boy who began last month, and an elderly man with gray hair who used to be a farmer until he lost his whole family. The tanner says we can manage 50 hides in a month, but it means working from dawn until dusk. I will give you each 25 pennies every day. Agnes folds her arms. 30. 28, he replies right away. And Sundays are off, the older man adds, for the church. The tanner lets out a deep breath. Okay. 28 pennies and Sundays free, but we begin at dawn tomorrow. As soon as he steps away, Agnes gives you a gentle nudge. Before the plague, he would have found it amusing that we even thought about higher wages. Now he negotiates as if we're on the same level. This was going on all around. A landowner in Suffolk noted in his journal that the workers had become so unruly that he feared them more than they feared him. Can you picture how dramatic that change must have seemed to those who had spent their whole lives in a strict hierarchy? By late summer of 1350, around 3 years after the plague first struck Europe, something extraordinary was unfolding in the countryside. Peasants were not only making more money, but they were also enjoying a better quality of life. You can picture it in your own life. With your earnings, you've left the shed behind and settled into a cozy little cottage, once home to its previous owners who have all passed away. You now have a proper bed with a soft mattress, leaving behind the straw for sleep. Your meals feature meat a few times each week, a rarity for ordinary people in the past. On your next free Sunday, you stroll to the village church. The building feels too big now for the smaller group. A young man with a nervous manner is the new priest, the 3rd one since the plague. As the first 2 have passed away, he quickly went through his training to help meet the urgent need for clergy. Brothers and sisters, he starts, his voice a bit shaky. Let us pray for those who are still enduring God's great punishment. A grandmother at the front rises to her feet. If this is God's punishment, why did he take my innocent grandchildren instead of sinners like the tax collector or the Lord's bailiff? They made it through unscathed. The priest stutters. The ways of God are not always clear. A voice calls out, shrouded in mystery. Was it puzzling how the Jews poisoned the wells to spread the disease? A terrible rumor spread throughout Europe, causing severe persecution of Jewish communities. In certain areas, whole Jewish communities were killed by groups searching for someone to hold responsible. The priest states firmly that there is no evidence of well poisoning. The Pope has stated this himself. Then why did the plague travel along trade routes? Someone else asks. It went along with where people went. This observation was really sharp. The disease spread along with human movement, not due to intentional poisoning, but because rats and fleas carrying the bacteria moved with people and their belongings. After the service, people gather in small groups outside the church. You catch bits of chatter around you. The miller is asking 3 times what he used to charge. It's hard to find good fabric these days. All the skilled weavers are gone. My cousin went to London and mentioned that a craftsman can set his own price there. The world has flipped over. Items that used to be affordable are now costly. Jobs that used to be looked down upon are now in high demand. People who previously had no options now have a variety of choices. You see Agnes chatting with a group of women and walk over to join them. Agnes is saying that she won't marry unless she can keep her job at the tannery and her own wages. And what did he say to that? Asks a younger woman, her eyes wide. He nodded and Agnes chuckled. Can you picture it? Before he passed away, he would have simply found another woman. She just shrugs now. These days, men rely on wives more than wives rely on husbands. It was more than just a change in economic strength. Social relationships were evolving as well. Many widows and widowers were starting new marriages, each with their own hopes and dreams. Women who had shown they could take care of themselves were not eager to lose that freedom. As you stroll home from church, you walk by the manor house where the Lord's son, now the Lord himself after his father's passing, is watching over some renovations. The windows are getting bigger, glass is going in, and even the nobles are living in a new way now. A few workers are resting in the shade, taking a break from building, and they wave you over. Tanner, someone calls, come share with Martin what you're making these days. You pause for a moment, then reveal how much you earn each day. The workers let out a cheerful whistle. The first man speaks to his friend, who is still learning the ropes. I mentioned we ought to request a bit more. Martin responds that the Lord will never agree. Then we all leave the job, the first man says with a shrug. Watch how quickly his stylish windows are completed. This group's ability to negotiate was unlike anything seen before. In the past, a lord could have dealt with troublemakers by having them whipped or even worse consequences. At this time, workers were coming together in ways that would later spark well-known uprisings, such as the 1381 Peasants' Revolt. Next week, you'll have a visitor from a big town that's 20 miles away. Master Fuller, the guest, speaks to the tanner. I am a member of the Tanners' Guild of St. Alban. We've heard about what you're doing here. The tanner looks unhappy. What about it? You're making leather without any guild supervision and without consistent quality. I've been tanning for 30 years, says Master Fuller. My leather is superior to many in your guild. Still, the visitor explains, the guild says that all tanners must join or stop working. Agnes leans in and softly says that before the plague, they would have quickly put a stop to him. Guilds had their hands on everything. Master Fuller chuckles, and when I say to return to your guild and kiss my backside, the visitor's face turns red. The guild holds power. Half your guild is gone, the tanner says, and I hear the others are struggling to meet the demand. I'm more important to you than you are to me. The visitor shifts their approach. Become a member of the guild, and we'll make sure your prices stay protected. We determine the rates for every member. What about the membership fee? Oh, usually it's £5, the visitor says, but considering the situation, we could lower it to £2. Master Fuller thinks about this. £1, and I can keep my current workers without needing approval from the guild. They negotiate for a bit longer before settling on a deal. Once the visitor departs, you wonder, what's the point of joining? You mention that they rely on you more than you rely on them. For now, the tanner gives a nod, but things can shift. It's wiser to be part of the guild than to struggle against it endlessly. He smiles, and now we can set guild prices. As autumn of 1350 arrives, a new change is noticeable. People really focus on staying healthy. New daily habits have come about that would have felt unusual before the pandemic. You spot it while trading at the village market. Shoppers bring aromatic herbs close to their noses as they browse. They keep their hands apart when passing coins. People often wear little bags filled with fragrant herbs around their necks. They're known as plague amulets. A woman selling these pouches says they keep the bad air away. Rosemary, mint, lavender, and wormwood dot keep it on all the time. Agnes has one on, but she looks a bit shy when you mention it. It won't hurt, she whispers. Dot, my neighbor, insists they work. Everyone on her street passed away, except for those who had the herbs. This was just a coincidence. The herbs had no effect on the true source of the plague. In a world without modern medicine, people clung to anything that looked like it could provide safety. Some new habits have come up as well. People heat water until it bubbles before drinking it. They set fire to the clothes of the deceased rather than using them again. Newcomers to the village are kept separate for a few days before they can join everyone else. Some of these practices, even if not fully understood, ended up helping to lower the spread of disease. Heating water to a boil eliminates many germs. Burning contaminated clothes gets rid of places where fleas can live. Staying in quarantine helps stop the spread of germs. Medieval people were figuring out public health measures that really worked through a process of trying and learning from mistakes. One evening, as you wrap up your work, you see smoke drifting up from the outskirts of the village. Next, you see a group setting fire to a large heap of straw mattresses and worn-out clothes. An older woman explains winter cleaning while watching the fire burn. Removing that could prevent the spread of illness before the cold weather keeps us all inside. Another unexpected advantage is getting rid of flea homes before winter, when people gather in cozy spaces, sharing warmth and, sadly, parasites. With winter coming, you notice how much your life has shifted in just 1 year. From a worker in the fields tied to the earth, to a learner in a craft dot, from resting on straw in a busy family hut, to enjoying your own cozy cottage with a proper bed. From being very hungry to having meals with meat regularly. There's another thing as well, a fresh appreciation. Those who used to overlook you are now talking things over with you. Your thoughts are important. Your abilities are important. You are now more than just a set of hands in the field, unique and valuable. On a chilly November evening, you find yourself in the village alehouse. A little treat you can now enjoy when the newly appointed bailiff walks in. Before the plague, the bailiff was the one who carried out the Lord's orders. This one seems just a bit older than you, and many find them intimidating or unlikable. He steps into the role because he has to, asking for everyone to notice that the Lord needs 3 men to fix the mill before winter arrives. 6 days of work, earning 30 pennies each day. A few months back, that would have been an incredibly high salary. Now the alehouse patrons hardly react. A man by the fire shouts, 35. An ale is served. The bailiff seems ready to argue, but he simply nods with a weary expression. All right, who will handle the task? 3 men finally step up, but only after getting clear commitments about the specific hours and conditions. The bailiff walks away, his shoulders slumped. An older patron remarks after the bailiff departs, I once saw the old lord turn a man's bones to jelly for speaking out like that. Now they're almost pleading for us to join in. Agnes, sitting beside you with a drink, leans in closer. It won't last, she whispers softly. The lords and traders. This new order won't be accepted for long. They'll discover a method to hold us down. She's more correct than she realizes. While you relish your new position and ease, there are already movements underway to bring back the previous structures. In England, the first laws to freeze wages will be put into effect in 1351. In France. There are similar efforts to manage labor costs. Right now, in this unusual time between the plague's impact and the powerful regaining their grip, every day people are going through something uncommon. Utilize dot later that night. As you walk back to your cottage, you see how the village has changed. It's not just the empty houses or the smaller crowd. It's the upgrades that stand out. Houses that used to be basic wooden buildings are now being reconstructed with stone bases. Windows that used to be simple openings with shutters are now covered with oiled paper or even glass. People are using their newfound money to improve their lives. In the comfort of your home, you light a candle. Beeswax instead of tallow, a little luxury you can enjoy now. Your bed has a mattress filled with wool instead of straw. A copper pot dangles by the fire instead of a clay one. These material improvements may appear minor today, but they brought about important changes in quality of life. Improved homes led to cozier, drier living spaces. Improved bedding led to improved sleep and less chance of parasites. Improved cooking tools led to healthier meals. All these improvements came together to create something meaningful. People were living longer, but not by a huge amount. Life in medieval times was tough, but those who survived the plague and dodged later outbreaks often enjoyed healthier lives than their ancestors. This was mainly due to improved nutrition and living conditions. As you gently fall asleep, you think about the odd contrast of your time, a world marked by loss, yet providing more chances for the living than ever before. Your wool-stuffed mattress may not match the comfort of your modern bed, but when you think back to the straw pile you slept on a year ago, it feels like pure luxury. Tomorrow will present fresh challenges and chances as the world changes around you. The old world has vanished, carried off by the plague's destruction. What comes next is still taking shape, still flexible, and for the first time, individuals like you can help mold it. Spring has come, bringing a curious feeling to the village. Almost 2 years have passed since the plague came, and life has found its new rhythm. You've gotten really good at tanning, making money that you never thought possible before. Agnes is now the tanner's wife, but she chose to keep her job and her own income. But something is changing. It starts with little things. Soft murmurs in the market, uneasy looks when pay is brought up. One morning, the village crier comes with an announcement. Listen closely, his voice echoes through the village square. Our King Edward has declared that the following laws are now in place across England. A group forms swiftly. In small villages, royal proclamations are rare happenings. The crier reads from a scroll, announcing that all workers, craftsmen, and servants will receive the same wages and terms as in the year 1346, before the great mortality. A soft murmur spreads through the crowd. What are the wages for 1346? That's not even half of what many people are making these days. Additionally, the crier speaks louder to be heard above the increasing commotion. Any able-bodied man or woman must accept suitable work when it is offered. People who break these laws will face fines or jail time. The audience bursts into cheers. A person tosses a turnip at the crier, who quickly ducks and keeps reading. Now, even louder, these laws are made for everyone's benefit, to keep the land from falling apart because of high pay and laziness. You're seeing the Statute of Laborers, which was put into effect in 1351. The ruling class reacted directly to the economic changes we've been observing. Landowners, nobles, and wealthy merchants were shocked by the increase in wages and the newfound freedom of workers. This law was their effort to go back to the time before the plague. When the crier wraps up and rushes off, the village bursts into heated chatter. A carpenter says they can't make this happen. Who will make me work for less than I deserve? A woman holding a basket replies, the king's sheriffs, you fool. If you say no, they'll put you in a cell. Master Fuller makes his way through the crowd to reach you and Agnes. His face looks very angry. Return to the TANNERY at this moment. When you return to the workshop, away from curious listeners, he walks back and forth, clearly restless. This is not good. Not good. Are you really going to lower our pay? Agnes inquires straightforwardly. The tanner brushes his fingers through his sparse hair. I'll do my best to prevent it, but they've placed enforcers in every county. They will look at guild records and ask workers questions. So, what should we do, you wonder? He pauses to consider. Your pay will reflect the previous wage rates. He speaks softly, even though he's all alone. I can take care of your meals. A cart filled with firewood could show up by your cottage every week. A winter coat could be a present, not a form of payment. This type of secret payment became usual. Employers who cared for their workers discovered methods to navigate the wage freezes. Some offered housing, food, or goods, along with the required lower wages. Some people just looked the other way when they thought they wouldn't get caught. The authorities were determined to enforce the rules. In just 2 weeks, you witness that seriousness up close. The weekly market comes to a halt as the sheriff and 4 armed men show up. They pull a stonemason into the square and make him kneel. The sheriff announces that this man asked for 3 pennies each day for his work on fixing the church. When the legal rate is 1.5, he has been found guilty of breaking the labor laws. The crowd stands quietly, eyes fixed on the sheriff as he speaks on. The punishment is 3 days in the stocks and a fine of 20 shillings. The mason is placed in the wooden stocks at the square's edge, his head and hands secured in the tight restraints. Left out in the open for everyone to see and endure the weather, the sheriff shouts a warning. The king's rule will be put into action. That evening, as night fell, the villagers quietly brought water and food to the mason. A person holds a cloak over him as it starts to rain lightly. Little gestures of support, yet significant. When the sheriff's men are not present, folks talk about the situation freely. An old merchant who travels between villages explains that the nobles are scared. They've spent their entire lives with peasants beneath their control. Now that we have some advantage, they're using the king's strength to overpower us. Is it possible for them to restore everything to the way it used to be? A person inquires. The merchant lets out a snort. They can give it a shot. However, there are now fewer workers, and that's something that cannot be altered by any law. He is correct. The basic economic truth, a significantly smaller workforce, couldn't be changed by laws. However, the ruling class had a long history of keeping power, and they were using all the means available to them. A month later, the tanner gathers everyone once more. The guild must keep careful records of every worker and their pay. He explains with a serious tone. Inspections will happen at unexpected times. Anyone caught getting extra pay will face a fine, as will their employer. Our arrangement has to stop. You start, and he finishes, looking truly sorry. They're keeping a close eye now. In an instant, your income is reduced by 50%. Your cozy life starts to show signs of wear and tear. The little pleasures disappear first. Skip the meat at every meal. No more fancy candles. Next, bigger sacrifices come into play. You need to leave the cottage you were renting and return to the tanner's shed to save some money. Many people experience these setbacks. In the village, those who started to better their lives now find themselves struggling again. The short chance we have appears to be narrowing, yet people are surprisingly flexible, particularly when driven by their own needs. New ways to resist appear. Do you need help with your garden? Inquires a farmer's widow one evening while you're trying to dig a small patch behind the tannery shed. I can't pay you, and you know it. She didn't offer it for money, but I have more turnips than I can eat. And that leather vest you're making seems to fit me just right. Bartering takes over as the new way to trade, where people directly swap goods and services without going through the usual wage system. It's not quite in line with the law, but it's more difficult to identify and penalize compared to clear wage violations. Some types of resistance are more straightforward. Work slowdowns happen often. If you're earning only half of what you deserve, why put in your best effort? Agnes watches one afternoon as you carefully scrape the hides, taking your time in a way that would have gotten you in trouble months ago. It's only worth a fraction of the pay and effort, you say. She looks around to make sure no one is paying attention. Be cautious. The master is feeling the heat from the guild. Workshops that fail to meet quotas are now facing fines. This pressure builds a strain between workers and employers, both trapped in a system they didn't design. Master Fuller, who used to be fair in his dealings, becomes irritable and demanding as the guild's expectations rise while his workers' motivation falls. He threatens to replace you after catching you on an authorized break. Who do you challenge, knowing that even with lower wages, there are still not enough workers? Hope you find someone who can prepare the lime pits just right. It's a risky game of daring. You need the job, even if the pay isn't great. He relies on your skills, which would be hard to find a replacement for in a short time. Neither can fully separate from the other. The situation in cities is increasingly unstable. A traveling peddler comes to the village, sharing stories from London. The guilds have brought in tough guys to scare the workers, he says to the crowd at the alehouse. Anyone thought to be taking more than the legal pay receives a late-night visit. Men have faced violence and workshops have been damaged. Someone asks, how are people responding? The peddler bends closer. Workers are coming together as well. Hidden gatherings, symbols to recognize one another. Some mention rebellion, but that's risky conversation. He gives his nose a thoughtful tap. These days, it feels like the walls are listening. During this time, there was also an increase in informants. Authorities provided rewards for reporting wage violations or worker groups. Neighbors reported on each other, leading to a feeling of distrust. One morning, you get to the tannery and see Agnes, her face pale and filled with worry. She whispers that Martin was taken into custody last night. Martin, the older man who worked with you, had turned into a bit of a guy. You wonder why, even though you can probably figure it out. The sheriff mentioned he was gathering workers who were getting ready to ask for higher wages again, and she nervously rubbed her arms. They mentioned that he will serve as a lesson for others. In just 2 days, that example is shared with everyone. Martin is taken to the village square, his hands tied. The sheriff reads the charges: incitement, conspiracy to break the labor laws. Insubordination, the punishment is harsh. A public branding on the face with a F for false, indicating an oathbreaker and then an imprisonment. The branding iron heats up, and the crowd starts to fidget. Whispers fill the air, and eyes dart with frustration. For a brief moment, it looks like they could step in. The sheriff feels it as well and gathers his men closer around the prisoner. The atmosphere grows charged as a wealthy merchant, who has gained from paying his workers less, takes a step forward. If I cover his fine, will you let him keep his brand and avoid jail time? He suggests. The sheriff thinks for a moment, then gives a quick nod. Cash is exchanged and Martin walks free with only a warning. The crowd breaks up, the danger past for now. Later, you ask the merchant about his reason for stepping in. Don't think of me as a hero for the workers, he says honestly, but a branded man in prison creates nothing and spends nothing, which is bad for business. And a riot would be even worse. It's a straightforward response, but it shows something significant. The economy had to keep running. Despite the strict laws, there was a point where the authorities couldn't go any further without causing the system to collapse. This shaky balance went on through 1351 and 1352. The laws stayed in place. The punishments were genuine, yet in everyday life. Countless little compromises and tweaks made it possible for life to go on. Some workers just relocated to places where the rules were not as strict, after learning that coastal towns are paying twice the legal rate for skilled workers. You think about this option yourself, knowing that local authorities are ignoring it out of practical necessity. I could go to Bristol, you say to Agnes one day, begin anew where no one is paying such close attention, and be a stranger with no ties when the next plague outbreak arrives, she replies. At least here, we have a group of people who support one another. She makes a good point. Even with the tough times, the ties between those who survived have grown stronger. People who experienced the horrors of the plague together share a bond that newcomers simply can't understand. By late 1352, 5 years after the plague first appeared in Europe, a strange new routine has taken shape. The old hierarchies come back into view. A tangled mix of solutions and pushback prevents workers from returning to how things were before the pandemic. It's there at the Christmas gathering in the village church. A new priest, a young man who seems a bit anxious, stands before the community meal to lead the prayers. As you glance around, you see that the seating arrangement has quietly shifted from what it used to be. Before the plague, the noble family lived apart, standing high above, while craftsmen and peasants understood their roles, clearly marked. Now, even though there's still a hierarchy, the lines are less distinct, and the Lord's Son, who has become the Lord, sits just a little apart. Talks happen more easily across different levels. Everyone has experienced loss, and everyone has had to adjust. The food shares a tale. Even with the wage limits, everyday folks are enjoying better meals than they had before the pandemic. With fewer people to feed, there's more meat and a wider variety of dishes available, all while using the same amount of agricultural land. This means that food production per person has gone up. Once the meal is finished, a spontaneous dance starts. You are now teamed up with a merchant's daughter, a situation that would have caused quite a stir in the past. As you step through the circle dance, you hear bits of chatter from all around the room. I'm considering reaching out to the king's court, but I can't find anyone ready to thatch the roof. For the proper pay, the sheriff has been accepting bribes to ignore certain things. I heard there's nice land up north. Every comment shows the ongoing balance between the law on paper and how life really is. Statute of laborers still has some success. Wages have dropped from their peak after the plague, but they haven't completely returned to the levels seen before the outbreak. As the night comes to a close, you stroll back to your shed. Feeling satisfied yet pondering over mixed emotions, your life is more challenging now than it was a year ago, when wages were at their highest, but it's still better than it could have been if the pandemic had never occurred. The stars above shine brightly in the winter sky, the same stars that have watched over this land long before the plague and will remain long after everyone living now has passed. From that wide view, even the disaster of the Black Death feels like just a brief moment. Awful, changing, yet just a single part of humanity's vast tale. And that's a soothing idea as you lie down on your straw mattress, so unlike your cozy bed today. Even with efforts to stop time and hold on to old power, change keeps happening. Sometimes it's clear in announcements and consequences, and other times it's subtle in countless small acts of negotiation and defiance. You'll head back to the tannery tomorrow. You'll earn less than you deserve, but more than your dad ever did. You'll move through the new reality, discovering ways to balance following the rules and pushing back. You'll get through this, just like people always do, by adjusting to the changes. In contrast to the ease of your modern life, those in medieval times faced constant reminders that nothing was assured, neither health, nor status, nor the very structure of society. The plague showed how fast things could shift, a lesson they would always remember. It has been 10 years since you started your journey as a tanner's apprentice. You have become a skilled craftsman, having taken over the workshop 3 years ago after Master Fuller passed away from a winter illness. Agnes continues to work with you, and now she's also showing her oldest daughter the ropes. The world has shifted in small, noticeable ways. The first surprise of the plague has turned into a memory, but those who experienced it will always remember. The urgent need for workers has lessened a bit now that the children born after the plague are old enough to join the workforce. Wages are now steady, sitting below the highest point after the plague. yet still above where they were before the outbreak. And something else has shifted as well, the way people view disease. It starts with a report that the plague has shown up in a town just 30 miles away. In the past, this kind of news would have sent everyone into a frenzy, with people rushing to escape and unintentionally spreading the illness even more. This time, the response feels unique. A merchant shares that the town council has locked the gates, just as he was able to leave before the quarantine started. Everyone stays inside, no one leaves, until the sickness is gone. Is it the entire town? Someone wonders. Are even the healthy included? The merchant has confirmed everyone. Food will be placed outside the walls, ensuring no direct contact with outsiders. This is fresh. When the first plague hit, people ran away from the sick places, taking the illness with them wherever they went. Communities are starting to separate themselves when illness arises. They weren't sure why it worked, but they noticed that it did. The village headman gathers everyone for a meeting to talk about what to do if the plague comes your way. The atmosphere feels very peaceful, not because people lack fear, but because they have new ways to cope beyond just praying and running away. The miller suggests we appoint plague wardens to look for signs of sickness in every household. People nod in understanding. Designated officials keeping an eye on public health were starting to appear all over Europe. Venice set up a health office to keep an eye on cleanliness and track illnesses. Agnes adds that we need a spot to keep the sick away from the village center. They choose an old barn at the village's edge, which will be tidied up and turned into a pest house, a spot where the sick can stay away from the well. When the meeting ends, the local priest comes over to you. I need leather, he says, getting straight to the point. 15. It's sufficient to cover the entire body. Why, you wonder, intrigued. He answers with protection. I know of a doctor in France who helps plague patients while dressed completely in leather, wearing a mask that looks like a bird's beak filled with fragrant herbs. He thinks it keeps the bad air away. What he's talking about is the first version of what would later turn into the famous plague doctor outfit. A coat made of leather or wax canvas, paired with gloves, boots, a hat, and a mask that has glass eye openings and a beak-like shape filled with herbs and spices. The design was based on the incorrect belief that diseases spread through bad air. However, the covering did offer some protection from flea bites, which were the true carriers of the disease. Will you provide the leather? I'm eager to check out this unusual outfit. When it's done a week later, the result is both funny and frightening. The priest resembles a peculiar birdman, yet the intent is profoundly serious. If the plague arrives, he says, pointing out how the eye holes are shielded with glass, I can care for the sick without getting sick myself. The news about the costume travels fast, and before long, others start asking for similar protective outfits. You discover a knack for creating medical protective wear, tweaking designs according to what users suggest. Practical innovation like this was taking place all over Europe. As universities lost many of their physicians during the plague, medical knowledge shifted from being mostly theoretical to more hands-on and practical. People explored various methods, observed what was effective, and exchanged that information. As summer comes, bringing warm days and concerns about illness, your village introduces a new method, warning systems for homes with infections. The headman announces that every home with illness should mark their door with a white cloth. Only the plague wardens and the priests come and go. Marking infected households became a usual practice throughout Europe. In certain areas, red crosses were painted on doors or guards were stationed outside homes affected by the plague. The aim remained unchanged, to contain through isolation. However, the most notable advancement emerged from Venice, thanks to an Italian leather merchant. He tells you they've created a unique place on an island in the lagoon while you discuss a shipment of tanning supplies. Any ship that might have illness on board must stay anchored there for 40 days before it can enter the city. 40 days. You're doubtful? That appears too much. Quarantigiani, he says with a casual shrug. 40 days, a time frame that allows for certainty that no hidden illness will appear. It's called quarantine. This marked the beginning of modern quarantine, with the term originating from the Italian word for 40 days. The practice started in the Venetian port of Ragusa, now known as Dubrovnik, in 1377, and then it spread to Venice and other ports around the Mediterranean. Is it effective? Just ask. The merchant says that Venice has stayed clear of big plague outbreaks since they put it in place, while other cities have faced great suffering. The idea quickly spreads beyond ports. A messenger comes from a nearby village where sickness has shown up, but he can't cross the village border. Instead, he has to drop his messages into a bucket of vinegar at a specific place, where they are picked up only after sitting for hours. People thought vinegar could clean things that had been touched by the plague, and interestingly, there was some truth to this idea. Vinegar's acid can eliminate some bacteria, but it doesn't affect the plague bacterium. Disinfecting items that might be contaminated was an important move toward better sanitation. By 1365, nearly 20 years after the first plague outbreak, medical knowledge has changed a lot. No one fully knows the real cause, which is bacteria from fleas on rats, but hands-on experience has resulted in useful ways to prevent it. A traveling physician comes to your village, and you can see this change happening right before your eyes. This new type of healer focuses on what they see and the outcomes they achieve. Unlike the university-trained doctors from before the plague, who depended a lot on old writings by Galen and other classical figures, I don't bleed my patients, he says, going against years of medical tradition. I've noticed that people who are bled during a plague get sick and die more quickly than those who aren't touched at all. This way of looking at things, focusing on what we can see instead of just following what others say, changed how people thought about medicine. The collapse of traditional medicine during the Black Death opened the door for new methods, and the physician offers additional insights. Plague appears to occur less frequently in tidy homes that have few rats and mice. I recommend that every home has cats and that food is kept in covered containers. Once more, without fully grasping how it worked, people were recognizing actions that truly helped lower the spread of disease by minimizing contact with rodents that carried the plague. Your workshop has adopted many new practices. Where scraps and waste used to pile up, everything is now neatly disposed of. The workshop gets a daily sweep, and cats roam around, helping to control the rodent population. On a crisp autumn day, a stranger stumbles into the village square, visibly suffering from a fever. Before anyone can get close, the village plague warden steps in front of him. Step back, he calls out to the crowd that is forming. Don't let anyone touch him. A sick man receives water and food, but he stays alone in a small hut on the outskirts of the village. The priest, dressed in his leather outfit, approaches to provide comfort and evaluate the sickness. The village waits in silence for his return. Not the plague, the priest declares, prompting visible sighs of relief from the crowd. I think it's a marsh fever. He should stay away until he gets better. This careful method of handling possible outbreaks marks a significant change from the time before the plague, when illness was mostly viewed as a result of divine wrath or mere misfortune. Now it is seen as something that can be controlled through human action. Children's games have evolved to show this new understanding. One evening, you see your neighbor's kids playing in the square, singing Ring Around the Rosie, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes. We all stumble and fall. They sing, twirling around before falling down in laughter. The rhyme is fresh, one of several that came about after the plague, although today's scholars argue if it truly relates to plague signs, the rosy rash and remedies like bunches of herbs. It illustrates how the experience of epidemic disease touched every part of culture, including the games children played. By 1370, your village has faced another small outbreak of plague. It wasn't as deadly as the first wave, but it was still quite alarming. The new systems worked well, keeping the sick apart, marking homes that were affected, organizing cleaning efforts throughout the village, and limiting travel. The results stand out. Although 6 families got sick, the illness didn't spread throughout the whole community like it did in the past. People continued to die, and medicine was still basic compared to what we know now. But it wasn't as catastrophic as the first outbreak. One evening, while sitting outside your workshop, you hear 2 young men chatting. They were both not yet born when the Great Plague hit. They only know it from tales. My father believes it was a decision from above, one that reflects the wrongdoings of humanity. My grandmother says it was the wells that were poisoned, the other replies. She still avoids drinking from public fountains. You give a small smile at these old explanations. Although many people still hold religious views and conspiracy theories about intentional poisoning, practical knowledge continues to progress, actually. You say it looks like it has to do with dirtiness and rats. Maintain a tidy home, have cats to catch rats, steer clear of the sick, and your odds improve. They pay attention with respect. You are now an elder, a person who has lived through the great dying. Your practical knowledge resonates with the younger generation. The passing down of practical knowledge from one generation to the next was important. Communities created and shared effective public health measures by noticing what worked, even without knowing the science behind it. In 1374, 27 years after the Black Death hit Europe, Venice sets up the first permanent quarantine station called a lazaretto on an island in its lagoon. Ships, goods, and people thought to carry disease would be held there before entering the city. When the news arrives in your village via traveling merchants, it sparks conversation at the alehouse. The miller remarks that the Venetians have a good approach. Prevent the disease from reaching the community. Another villager suggests we should follow suit. Construct a house on the outskirts of the village for travelers to spend a week in before they arrive. A concept receives backing, and in just a few months, your village has a small quarantine station, a modest hut with essential facilities, marking an important advancement in community health safety. You're requested to supply leather for a special door that can be easily cleaned, along with protective aprons for the staff managing the station. Your trade, which began with making shoes and saddles, has now expanded to include these medical applications. This clever approach defined the medical world after the plague. Even without today's scientific knowledge, people created useful methods by watching, trying things out, and sharing what they learned. These changes have also impacted your daily habits. You clean yourself more often than you did before the outbreak. Your living space stays tidy. You notice when you or someone else isn't feeling well. You have a basic grasp of ideas about contagion and prevention that weren't widely known before. On a warm summer day, while you're busy outside your shop, you spot a man observing you from across the square. He seems a bit familiar, but you can't quite figure out why. As he gets closer, it suddenly clicks. "Is that you, Martin?" You inquire hesitantly. "Yes, it's Martin, the older worker who got arrested for helping organize laborers more than 20 years ago." His hair is all white now, and he walks with a little limp, but his eyes look just the same. He smiles and says, "I didn't think you remember me." You gesture for him to take a seat and hand him a cup of ale. He accepts it with thanks, sharing that he's been moving around the area, finding work as he goes. He notices the changes as he looks around the village. There are a few things you agree on. Wages didn't return to their post-plague levels, but they are still higher than they used to be, and there are fewer people in charge of us. He clarifies, nodding toward a house with a white cloth tied to the door, that he meant the plague markers, not the plague itself, but a general illness that called for caution, Back in my father's time, sickness was something kept to oneself. Now it's out in the open for all to see. He's found something deep. The change from viewing health as an individual issue to seeing it as a shared responsibility within the community. This public health approach, created out of need during the plague years, marked a significant shift in how society dealt with disease. As the sun goes down and Martin gets ready to move on, he shares a thought that reflects the odd contrast of your world after the plague. The plague claimed half of what we knew, he says, but it showed the survivors to cling tightly to what was left. It's a feeling that connects as you walk back into your workshop. The plague was one of history's major disasters, but the world it created wasn't just a lesser version of what existed before. It was a fresh idea, a community that had grown, changed, and in certain ways thrived even after facing great hardships. When night arrives, you walk up the tanner shop and make your way home. Unlike your medieval counterpart, you'll rest in a tidy, cozy bed in a world where pandemic diseases are mostly manageable thanks to the medical knowledge that started to grow in the important years following the Black Death. The medieval survivors lacked comfort, yet they started a long journey of understanding that would eventually pave the way for modern medicine. One careful observation and practical innovation at a time. It has been 30 years since the Black Death first moved across Europe. Your hair has turned gray with age, but the tannery is thriving thanks to your leadership. You've also taught many apprentices, and now they have their own workshops in nearby villages. The world has shifted around you as well. Kids who came into the world after the plague have grown up and are now raising their own kids. For them, the great mortality is merely a tale shared by their elders, not something they have experienced themselves, yet its impacts still influence society in clear and subtle ways. On a crisp autumn morning in 1380, the royal tax collector comes to your village. He walks in, and everyone notices right away. Tax collectors have always been unwelcome guests, but recently they've become even more disliked. Another tax, the blacksmith mutters as people slowly gather in the village square. They gathered it just last spring. A slender man with anxious eyes, the tax collector opens a scroll. The King's Council has decided that a new poll tax will be applied to everyone over the age of 15, no matter their status or income. Everyone needs to pay 3 groats. The crowd's whispers become more pronounced. Poll taxes are set amounts paid by each person, no matter their wealth, and they impact the poor much more than the rich. This is the 3rd time such a tax has been introduced in just 4 years. A farmer calls out 3 groats. That's almost what a laborer earns in a week. The tax collector pays no mind to the protests, simply reading from his scroll. Payment should be made by the end of the month. People who don't pay will go to jail. As he wraps up, he looks up anxiously at the crowd, growing more unfriendly, and quickly adds, "I just delivered the message. The tax was approved by Parliament." Agnes, in her 60s yet still quick-witted, steps forward. "Who's in Parliament?" "Not individuals like us." She is correct. At this time, Parliament was mainly made up of rich landowners and merchants. The ordinary folks didn't have a direct voice. Once the tax collector departs, guided to the edge of the village by the headman, the crowd remains gathered. The conversation becomes more intense. A mason says they first lowered wages with their laws. Now they take away the small amount we earn with these poll taxes. One person mentions it's for the French wars, another agrees. Why do we need to fund the king's wars? What do we receive from them? The frustration you're seeing was felt in many places, not just your village. In various parts of England, similar talks were taking place. After a short period of empowerment following the plague, 30 years of economic hardship created a lot of anger. The poll taxes were the small trigger that would eventually set off this explosive situation. That evening, a stranger walks into the alehouse. A man dressed plainly, yet he communicates with remarkable eloquence. He gets drinks for everyone and hears the villagers talk about their worries regarding the new tax. He finally says it's the same everywhere. From Kent to Yorkshire, workers are feeling the pressure. So what should we do about it? A young farmer asks with frustration. They carry swords, we have plowshares. The stranger leans in closer. In Essex and Kent, men are holding secret meetings and discussing plans for action. The tavern falls silent. This type of conversation might be seen as rebellious. What type of action? You inquire gently. The stranger sizes you up before responding. It starts as a petition. Many voices can be heard together, while just a few might go unnoticed. And if not, he lets the suggestion linger. In the coming weeks, you start to hear more whispers about these gatherings. Some of the younger men from your village start to vanish in the evenings, coming back late with bright smiles but tight lips. Agnes' grandson Thomas is now employed at your tannery. One morning, you see a new bruise on his cheek. You walked into a door, didn't you? You inquire, aware of the truth. The young man looks around to make sure no one is paying attention. Last night, there was a meeting. The Kingsmen shattered it. You're taking a big risk, you caution. Thomas stands up straight. Is it unreasonable to seek fair treatment? They hold us back with one hand and take our money with the other. It's pointless to debate with him. You've experienced the whole journey. A short chance that came after the plague, the legal crackdown that came next, and now these heavy new taxes. With winter on the way, tax collection starts in full swing. The results are not pleasing. In some homes, people sell important items to gather the money. In some cases, especially where there are multiple adult members, making a payment is just not feasible. You see a family being removed from their small home, their limited belongings taken away to settle their tax bill. A mother holds a crying baby close while the father looks on, feeling powerless. Their older children, including a daughter just 16, are brought to the town jail until the debt is settled, which, without their help, seems even less possible. The scene played out all over England, stirring increasing anger. The authorities appear to have overlooked an important lesson from the plague years. When people feel they have nothing to lose, they can become a threat. The winter of 1380 to 1381 feels heavy with anticipation. Hidden gatherings carry on, even with increased restrictions. Messages move from one village to another, brought by wandering workers or peddlers. People are discussing a united effort for resistance in the spring. In May of 1381, the fire finally ignites. News from Essex tells Jews that tax collectors have been chased away by upset. Crowds stop similar events quickly, spread across Kent. Thomas tells you excitedly that a man named Wat Tyler is leading them in Kent. There's a priest named John Ball who shares the idea that all men are equal and that serfdom goes against what God wants. John Ball's well-known line, "When Adam delved and Eve span, who is then the gentleman?" challenges the core of the feudal system. If Adam and Eve were the first people and they toiled with their hands, then how could nobles assert their dominance? The situation grows more intense each day. What started as isolated tax protests has turned into a united uprising. Many commoners are walking towards London, guided by Tyler and other new leaders. Your village is too far north to be part of the main rebellion, but the thrill is in the air. A few young men, like Thomas, decide to join the marchers. Some people start to say no to what the local authorities want. The village priest, sensing how his congregation feels, gives a sermon that doesn't directly criticize the rebels. He reminds them that Jesus dined with tax collectors, yet he also drove the money changers out of the temple. For around 2 weeks now, surprising news keeps coming in. The rebels have made it to London. They've let the prisoners out. They've carried out the execution of the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Lord High Treasurer and other officials blamed for the poll tax. Most surprisingly, the 14-year-old King Richard II met with the rebels at Mile End and accepted their demands, including the end of serfdom. A sense of hope spreads across the countryside. Is this really happening? Is the old order really being changed? Then comes the sad news. Wat Tyler was killed during a second meeting with the king at Smithfield. Without him, the rebel forces fell apart. The king took back his promises. The royal forces came together and started a harsh campaign against the rebels. The news strikes your village hard. Thomas and the others who left are still missing. No one is sure if they are gone, taken, or just laying low. The officials quickly move to take charge again. A group of armed soldiers comes to your village, led by a lesser noble. The king has declared that all illegal gatherings are now prohibited. Anyone involved in rebellion will face execution. The poll tax must be paid in full. To show they mean business, they pull the village headman into the square. The noble says this man didn't report secret meetings. He will receive 40 lashes as punishment. You see the headman tied to a post, being whipped until his back is covered in blood. He's left there as a warning while armed men go from house to house, looking for any hint of rebellion. When they arrive at your tannery, the noble scrunches his nose at the smell, a reaction you've witnessed countless times. Have any of your workers joined the crowd in London? He asks, You think of Thomas, who could already be gone. No, my lord, we've been occupied with spring orders. He looks at you with suspicion but can't prove anything. Before he goes, he says the king needs leather for his army's gear. You'll give 10 hides, the best quality, as a loyalty tax. It's not a request. After they leave, Agnes steps out from her hiding spot in the back of the workshop. You lied to protect Thomas, she says softly. I did, you admit, even if it might have cost me dearly. She takes your hand, her skin thin and fragile. This isn't finished, she says with unexpected certainty. They won today, but their fear is evident. They wouldn't gather armies to overpower peasants if they weren't scared. In the coming weeks, the full scale of the repression will be revealed. Many rebels face execution. Those who remain are made to name their leaders. Entire communities suffer with extra taxes and the loss of their traditional rights. Agnes was correct about one thing. The way the authorities reacted showed their fear. The rebellion had nearly succeeded. For a brief moment, the common people had forced the most powerful figures in the realm to listen to their demands. One evening, as you're closing up the tannery, a hooded figure slips inside. When he pushes back his hood, you're startled to see Thomas, thinner, with a healing scar across his forehead, but very much alive. Thomas, your grandmother has been really worried about you. I couldn't return until now, he explains. They were capturing anyone who had been in London. Were you there? Did you see the king? You can't help but feel curious about the stories you've only heard from others. I was there when the Savoy Palace burned, he says, mentioning the grand London home of the king's uncle, John of Gaunt, which rebels had set ablaze. I saw the Tower of London opened and the prisoners set free. For 3 days, London was alive with the spirit of the people. His eyes sparkle with the memory, even though the rebellion didn't succeed. And now you wonder? His face grows somber. And now a wanted man. I have to leave England. There are ships in the northern ports carrying wool to Flanders. I considered that. Given your ties to the merchants, it might be best to say no. Assisting him could lead to your own demise if found out. Yet you recall what it was like to be his age. Think back to the optimism of those first years after the plague, when it felt like real change was possible. You mention a wool merchant who owes you a favor. But first, you'll need to stay out of sight until everything is set up. For the next week, Thomas stays in your cellar while you reach out to the merchant. Soon, a plan forms. Thomas will be sneaked out dressed as the merchant's servant. Heading to Bruges Dot the night before he departs, you sit side by side with a jug of ale between you. Do you regret joining the rebellion? You ask. Thomas thinks it over. We failed, he says quietly. For a brief moment, they recognized us. Not as workers or craftsmen, but as individuals whose opinions held value. He takes a sip before adding, that's significant. It's a viewpoint that historians would later confirm. Even though the peasants' revolt was defeated, it had important effects. The poll tax was dropped. While serfdom wasn't completely ended, it started to fade away more quickly in England than in other parts of Europe. The thought that ordinary people could come together to fight for their rights was seen as a troubling example by those in power. Thomas departs before the sun rises, and his final outcome remains a mystery. Yet, his last words linger in your mind. The world my children will know will be different from the one my grandfather experienced. We've made changes even if we won't witness them ourselves. While the immediate aftermath of the revolt was met with strict control, the overall direction couldn't be undone. The plague triggered economic and social changes that would ultimately weaken the feudal system, no matter the laws and enforcement. In France, these tensions resulted in the Jacquerie Rebellion of 1358. Meanwhile, in Florence, the Ciompi Revolt of 1378 allowed textile workers to momentarily seize control of the city government. Throughout Europe, the lower classes began to take bold steps to confront a system they understood was made by people, not by divine will, and could be altered. As an elder in the community, you find yourself in a unique spot. You recall the time before the plague and the chaotic years that followed. You've noticed how much society can shift, even when strong forces push back. You realize, unlike the young rebels, that change usually happens gradually, with ups and downs, and sometimes setbacks. Later that summer, you hear that the young King Richard II has let go of some of the most disliked officials behind the poll tax. It's a little change, but maybe it shows that some lessons have been picked up. The village slowly goes back to its routine, or what feels like routine in this changed world. The tannery keeps on doing its job. New apprentices come in to take the place of those who have left. The patterns of rural life return. Yet beneath that surface calm, the social agreement has changed forever. The lords and authorities still have their power, but the people now see that it isn't all-encompassing. The common folks, the everyday workers, have found their strength together, a realization that will stick with them. One afternoon, you're showing a new apprentice how to prepare a hide for tanning when the talk shifts to the rebellion. The boy says, "My father thinks it was all for nothing. The nobles still rule, then we still pay taxes." You ponder how to reply, considering how to convey the complicated history of those restless times. At last, you think when the plague arrived, it felt like everything was over. Yet those who made it through discovered new chances that were previously unthinkable. You touch the leather, sensing how it changed from rawhide to something practical. The rebellion may seem like a loss right now, but it has sown the beginnings of something new. Your grandchildren may one day reap the benefits of what we've planted. As you speak these words, you find that you truly believe them. Change takes time, but the path ahead is unmistakable. The old medieval world, with its strict rules and unchanging social lines, is slowly transforming into something different. Not a perfect place, but a society where even ordinary people can speak up. That night, as you stroll home through the village, you walk by the church where worn stone honors those who came before. Within those walls, prayers have been said for those lost to disease, for fighters, for rulers. The structure remains as it has for ages, looking the same. But you understand more. You've witnessed change in both dramatic bursts and subtle movements. You realize that nothing, be it social order, authority, or even the church, is truly lasting. This understanding is something your modern, easy life seldom compels you to face. Unlike those who lived through plagues and uprisings in medieval times, you probably think of stability as a given, expecting tomorrow to look much like today. However, the experience of the years after the plague teaches an important lesson. What seems unchangeable can shift, whether due to disaster, pushback, or the gradual force of economic truth. What matters is not just the change itself, but who is a voice in shaping what comes after. The summer of 1374 brings something strange to your region. At first, it's just rumors carried by travelers. Tales so bizarre you dismiss them as exaggerations or outright fabrications. But then you witness it yourself when visiting a neighboring town for a leather fair dot in the town square. A crowd is dancing, not in neat circles or graceful pairs, but in a wild, free-spirited way. Men and women of all ages jump and spin, arms waving, bodies twisting, their faces showing a mix of joy and pain. Some shout, some laugh loudly, while others appear caught in a strange dream. The duration is truly unsettling. They have been dancing for hours. As you observe, one woman falls to the ground, foaming at the mouth, while others keep dancing until their feet bleed through their shoes. Yet they persist. You ask a bystander what is happening to them. Dancing plague, the man replies with a serious look. It started 3 days ago with just one woman. Imagine this, 20 or more people dancing together. It was a true event recorded all over Europe after the Black Death. In towns like Aachen, Liege, and Utrecht, groups would dance without control for hours or even days. Unable to stop, even as they fell from tiredness, are they possessed? Someone in the crowd asks. Maybe, replies a cleric, clearly troubled. Maybe it's the plague coming back in a new way. Others share their own ideas, an old woman. Says it's from dancing over unmarked plague graves. The dead are jealous of the living. Another counters that it's St. Vitus' curse for neglecting his feast day. You watch, captivated by the unsettling scene, until Agnes tugs at your sleeve. We should go, she says softly. Some believe it spreads like a disease, through bad air or being too close. As you turn to leave, you see something strange about the crowd watching the dancers. People hold bunches of herbs close to their noses, a way to stay safe during the plague. Some draw protective symbols to ward off evil, but the most unusual thing is the look in certain eyes, not just fear or disgust, but a hint of desire, as if a part of them wishes to join the wild dance. The dancing plague was just one of the odd events that followed the plague's aftermath. As you journey for your leather business in the coming decade, you encounter strange events. A laughing epidemic that spreads through 3 villages in Bavaria, children speaking in tongues after a religious procession, at a town where hundreds claim to see the Virgin Mary in the clouds at the same time. Today, historians and psychologists think these were types of mass psychogenic illness, where physical symptoms arise from psychological distress and spread among people. The deep trauma of the Black Death, which took many lives and changed society, left a population ready for such occurrences. For the people back then, these happenings needed various explanations. They thought of divine intervention, demonic possession, or new kinds of physical illness. By 1380, at the age of 60, you had become known as one of the plague-wise, having lived through the great mortality and learned practical ways to survive. Young people often come to you for advice or tales, especially when whispers of illness arise. One day, the baker's daughter asks, "Is it true that you can tell if someone will get the plague by having them drink sheep urine?" My cousin says if it makes them throw up, they're already sick. You simply shake your head. That's just silly. Nobody can tell who will fall ill. These odd folk remedies and ways of diagnosing have spread a lot since the time of the plague. Some actions were safe, like carrying herbs or saying specific prayers. Others were risky, like taking poisonous substances thought to ward off infection. So, how did you make it through when so many others didn't? She continues to ask Dot. It's a question you face repeatedly, and the answer still eludes you. Was it just luck, a unique strength in your body, or perhaps fate? You chose a straightforward explanation long ago. I stayed away from those who were ill whenever I could. I kept myself clean. I ate healthy when there was food. You just shrugged. Dot. Maybe God just wasn't ready for me yet. This mix of practical steps and a sense of fate shaped how people dealt with survival after the plague. They did what they could with the new knowledge about contagion, while also recognizing that a lot was still out of their hands. Religious practices had changed as well. You can see it during the Corpus Christi procession that summer, a festival that had actually become more important after the plague. The participants now include a new group, flagellants. These men walk through the village without shirts, striking their own backs with leather straps that have metal pieces attached. Blood trickles down their skin as they chant prayers for forgiveness. The priest, observing with a calm face, explains that they think this suffering will keep them safe from disease. The church had a tricky relationship with flagellants. Although self-mortification was rooted in religious tradition, the movement became so big and independent that it posed a challenge to church authority. When the plague first hit, groups of flagellants moved from town to town, carrying out public whipping rituals to seek forgiveness from God. Interestingly, their journeys probably contributed to the wider spread of the disease. Although the Pope eventually prohibited the practice, smaller groups persisted for many years. It's notable how the community responds to these violent events. Some people watch with respect, making the sign of the cross. Others look away in disapproval. A few seem almost jealous, as if the flagellants have discovered clarity in a confusing world through their deep commitment. That evening in the alehouse, the talk shifts to a curious trend of late, the fascination with images of death. Did you catch the new paintings in the church at Thornbury? A wool merchant asks. The whole wall is filled with dancing skeletons, guiding people to their graves. Nobles, clergy, peasants, all joining in death's dance. This was the dance macabre, or dance of death, an artistic style that became very popular after the plague. These images showed death as a skeleton, picking victims from all walks of life, highlighting that wealth or status couldn't protect anyone. A lesson deeply ingrained by the plague's random destruction. I saw a similar scene at St. Paul's in London. Another man adds, the bony figures appeared to be chuckling as they guided the living onward. The focus on death wasn't just found in church art. It touched everyday life in clear and hidden ways. Remember, death had turned into a familiar idea in jewelry, home items, and even toys for kids. Anna's great-granddaughter, a cheerful 7-year-old, proudly shows you her wooden doll. One side is carved to depict a lovely young woman, while the other reveals a grinning skull with worms in the eye sockets. The child explains with a serious tone that her mother says it helps her think about heaven rather than earthly matters. This unusual perspective might have seemed strange before the plague, especially for toys, but in a world where death is so present, facing mortality directly feels like the only truthful way to be. Clothing and fashion changed after the plague. The serious, practical styles of earlier medieval times were replaced by more extravagant and even wild designs. Men wore shoes with long points that had to be tied to their knees with chains. Women wore tall, horn-shaped headdresses. A tailor from London, visiting your village with the newest styles, says there's no point in being modest when life is uncertain. The wealthy, in particular, want to show off their riches while they can dot after witnessing nobles and beggars alike in mass graves. They are set on making a name for themselves while alive. This mindset of enjoying life to the fullest, as if each day could be their last, shaped much of the culture after the plague. Chroniclers noted a rise in gambling, drinking, and a loosening of moral standards. Some people became very devoted to their faith, while others sought pleasure and enjoyment. By 1385, you start to see a change in culture, with more people interested in the everyday languages they spoke instead of just Latin. Books and poems in English, French, Italian, and German became easier to find and were talked about more often. This was another consequence of the plague. With many clergy gone, fewer people could read Latin. At the same time, the rise of the working classes had lifted their own languages. Works like Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury, Tales in English, or Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron in Italian show this new reality. A traveling scholar visits your workshop looking for leather for book bindings, and you inquire about this trend. He explains that before the mortality, knowledge was closely guarded by the church and nobility, mainly through Latin, but death treated everyone the same, whether they read Latin or not. Now, people seek wisdom in language that makes sense to them. You reflect on this later while working on the Scholars Commission. You didn't learn to read, but your grandson can, thanks to the village priest who made it through the plague. The thought that knowledge could be available to everyday people feels like another wall coming down in this new world. After the plague, the 1390s see another round of plague in some parts of Europe, but it's not as bad as the first time, yet it brings back worries and sparks new, strange behaviors in society. In certain areas, officials decide to eliminate all dogs and cats, thinking they carry the disease. This sadly takes away the natural hunters of rats, which could actually worsen the problem. In some towns, travelers need to have health certificates from where they come from, an early way to keep track of public health. Interestingly, there are communities where those who survive the plague are seen as both lucky and unlucky, thought to have special abilities, but also possibly still spreading illness. Some are looked to as healers, while others are avoided. A woman selling amulets in the marketplace claims that a plague survivor's touch can cure warts and fever. A man nearby scoffs at this idea, saying, "My sister survived the great mortality, and the only thing special about her was her terrible singing." The laughter it brings shows a shift. With more people using dark humor to deal with trauma, jokes about death, disease, and mortality have become quite common. Even in church art, where you might find funny touches alongside skeletons and demons. This kind of humor plays a key role, helping people to work through their fears and sadness with a laugh. It was another way to deal with a world that had changed so much. By 1395, as you near your 80s, quite an achievement for those times, you find yourself thinking more deeply. One calm evening, sitting outside your workshop and watching the sunset with Agnes, who is now old and fragile but still has a keen mind, you talk about the odd world the plague brought about. Do you remember how they danced until they could dance no more? Agnes says, recalling the dancing plague. Sometimes I feel like we're all still dancing, just at a slower pace. How so, you might wonder? We rush around, building, trading, and fighting, as if staying busy will keep death from seeing us, she says with a wry smile. But the plague showed us that death notices everyone, eventually. A harsh lesson, you see, but a real one, she replies. And truth matters, even when it hurts. Her words express something important about your world after the plague. The Black Death had removed the comforting beliefs about how things should be, about safety from above, and about the reliability of human systems. What was left was a clear view of reality, a readiness to face life and its fragility. At the same time, this serious perspective brought a deeper appreciation for the joys and chances life offers. Those who lived through the plague learned to grab opportunities as they came, to seek happiness whenever they could, and to cherish human connections in a world where they can be lost in an instant. In late 14th century culture, you can easily notice a mix of two perspectives. Churches show both frightening images of hell and gentle representations of divine mercy. Literature dives into the darkest human experiences while also celebrating the most uplifting moments. Music goes from serious requiems to lively drinking songs. This varied reaction to widespread death shaped European art, literature, philosophy, and religion for many years. The Renaissance, focusing on humanism and the importance of life on Earth, partly emerged from ideas developed during these unusual years after the plague. As twilight settles in, Agnes gestures toward a bunch of kids gathered by the village well, engaged in a lively game with circles and chants. "What do you think they're playing?" she asks. You tune in to their melodic voices. Ring around the rosy pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. The children tumble into laughter, then quickly get back up to start over. The true origin of this nursery rhyme as a reference to the plague is still a topic of discussion among scholars. Today, watching the children turn scary images, rosy rashes, purple flowers, ashes, and fallen figures into playful scenes captures the strength of humanity. They're pretending to survive, you say at last, turning our fears into their fun. Agnes nods in agreement. Maybe that's what we've all been doing in our own ways. As night settles in, you both go inside, moving slowly with the familiar aches of age. Your cottage, much cozier than the home of your childhood before the plague, feels like a sign of how much has changed over the years. Even with all the material improvements, the most important changes were often unseen. It was about how people viewed themselves and their role in the world. The plague showed how fragile humanity could be, but also how it could adjust and thrive. It showed how social hierarchies can seem random while also highlighting the importance of community. These mixed lessons, a sense of humility about human power and a recognition of human potential, would keep influencing European thoughts long after the last plague victim was laid to rest. As you get ready for sleep, so different from your modern bedtime with its bright lights and quick comforts, you think about the unusual path from disaster to adjustment that you've seen. The dancing plagues, the focus on death, and the strange behaviors were not just side notes to the Black Death story, but key parts of how humanity dealt with overwhelming trauma. In contrast to your cozy bed tonight, a medieval elder would lie down on a basic mattress, sometimes stirred awake by haunting memories of the plague years, yet also holding the hard-earned understanding that life goes on, changes, and can even thrive after disaster. The year 1400 comes, signaling the start of a new century. You've witnessed it, though few from your time are still around. At more than 80 years old, you are seen as a living piece of history, one of the few who recalls the world before everything changed. Your hands, once capable of handling the toughest leather, are now twisted with age. You've handed the tannery over to your grandson, but you still drop by every day to share advice and, most importantly, to tell stories. The younger workers come together in hushed moments, curious to learn about the past. A young apprentice asks, "What was it like before the plague?" You take a moment to think. How do you describe a world that has vanished, with its strict rules, clear rules, and unquestioned leaders' ideas that feel distant to these kids from the post-plague era? More orderly, you eventually reply, everyone understood their role and stuck to it. Sons took on the same work as their fathers. Peasants stayed tied to the land. Lords and clergy held all the power. That sounds dull, the boy says, making the others laugh. Maybe it was, you agree, but there was a sense of safety in that structure as well. Fewer questions, less doubt. But even as you think this, you can't help but wonder if that's how you truly recall it, or if time has made those years before the plague seem simpler than they were. Was the old world really safer or just more limiting? Did the look of stability hide struggles that were ignored? These thoughts would have seemed unusual for someone like you back then. That shows just how much society has changed. Everyday people now talk about ideas that used to be for scholars and clergy. Later that week, You take your great-grandson to Florence for a leather selling trip. The city has changed a lot since your first visit years ago. New buildings pop up all around, their designs feeling open and bright compared to the old medieval ones you remember. The Duomo, the impressive cathedral dome by Brunelleschi, is being worked on, a project so grand it would have seemed like a dream in the world you grew up in. Grandfather, look. Your great-grandson is pointing to a workshop filled with people. Inside, an artist is painting a scene from classical mythology, featuring pagan gods and goddesses brought to life with amazing detail. This change in art, moving from only Christian themes to classical and secular subjects, is just one of the many transformations you've seen. After the plague showed that the church couldn't stop or heal the sickness, its hold on culture started to fade. People continued to believe and go to Mass, but they were more open to seeking answers outside of religious leaders. The artist takes a moment away from his work, and you see him as one of Florence's emerging talents, a young man named Asachel. His paintings use fresh techniques that make flat surfaces look like they have depth. The crowd quietly admires as he adds another brushstroke. They say he captures people as they truly are, whispers your great-grandson, not as flat symbols like the old church paintings. This focus on realism, on observing and showing the world as it truly is, instead of through religious symbols, is another part of the post-plague mindset. After confronting death so closely, people appeared less content with vague images of life. After watching the artist, you stop by the workshop of a family friend who sells books and manuscripts. His shelves hold books in Latin, Italian, French, and other languages. He shows you a beautifully bound volume from Petrarch's followers, filled with poetry that celebrates human achievement and beauty, contrasting sharply with the death-focused writings from a few decades earlier. Francesco Petrarch experienced the Black Death firsthand, writing movingly about its horrors. He and the thinkers who came after him introduced a fresh perspective known as humanism, which emphasized human potential over divine influence. The bookseller adds that there is an increasing demand for classical texts like those of Plato, Cicero, and Aristotle. People are finding old knowledge again. This renewed interest in classical learning came after the plague. With many scholars and clergy gone, ancient manuscripts were shared and ended up in new hands. At the same time, questioning medieval authorities led to a greater appreciation for ancient wisdom. Strolling through the streets of Florence, you can see other changes that show this fresh perspective. Public buildings are now being built by wealthy merchants instead of the church or nobility. Women can be seen in workshops and businesses, carrying on with the new roles they took on during the labor shortages. Children are learning to read and write in increasing numbers, no matter their background. The world is changing, your great-grandson notes as you sit on a bench by the river Arno. My friend Patala is learning math. His dad used to be a butcher. It would have been hard to imagine such a change in life back when you were a kid. The plague had shattered old systems, allowing new talent to emerge no matter their origins. That evening, while at an inn, you hear merchants talking about political changes that showed just how much the world has changed since the plague. One mentions that Milan's attempt at a republican government didn't work, but Florence's council system appears to be holding strong. Venice's model is quite fascinating, counters another. It's neither a monarchy nor a true republic, but rather a system with checks and balances. These discussions about governance models show a shift towards political experimentation. As traditional authorities faded due to the plague, cities and regions had to find new ways to govern. Some went back to older methods, while many embraced new ideas that spread power more broadly. Even the way people interact in daily life has changed. At dinner, you see merchants, craftsmen, and artists chatting together, sharing ideas as if they are all on the same level. The rigid boundaries of social classes from before the plague have faded a lot. One man raises his glass to toast Lorenzo's new banking venture, celebrating with another, may it benefit Florence just as the Medici did. The emergence of banking families like the Medici marks another change after the plague. With land no longer being the only source of wealth and power, financial innovation opened up new ways to gain influence. Merchant banker families frequently used their wealth to support the arts and education, becoming patrons of the cultural blossoming known as the Renaissance. After a week in Florence, you reflect on how much the world has transformed during your lifetime. It's not only that buildings have changed or new technologies have appeared, although advancements in printing, navigation, and military technology are also part of it. The real change is in how people view themselves and their role in the universe. The plague revealed our smallness. You tell your great-granddaughter one evening as she helps with dinner how easily we could be swept away. Yet it also revealed our greatness, how we could rebuild, reimagine, and create beauty even from the ashes. The girl, just 15 but already sharp and thoughtful, thinks about this. Is that why there's so much new art and construction happening now? Because we went through the hardest times and came out the other side? Maybe you agree. When half the world was lost, those who remained had to rethink everything they believed. Some went back to what they knew, while others embraced what was ahead. This viewpoint, your chance to see the world before and after the plague, is becoming less common. As the 15th century moves on, fewer people recall the time before 1347. The changes that once felt groundbreaking to you are now just the norm for your great-grandchildren. By 1410, your body is weaker, but your mind is still clear. From your chair by the window, you observe the village life that quietly transforms around you. Kids go to a little school set up by a local shopkeeper. This is another change after the plague, as learning starts to reach beyond just priests and the rich. Women meet at the well, chatting about more than just home life, but also about politics and business. A group of workers talks confidently with the Lord Steward about the harvest terms. They don't think of themselves as living in a world after a disaster or during a time of renewal. Still, every part of their lives has been influenced by the lasting effects of the plague and the chances that came from the destruction. On a spring morning in 1411, a visitor comes, a scholar from the university in Bologna, traveling through the area to gather stories from those who survived the plague. There are only a handful left to speak with. He shares that he's recording stories from people before they're gone. It's important for future generations to understand what took place and how everything transformed. You ask him to take a seat and share any memories you have. Some details have blurred over the years, but others stand out clearly. The quiet stillness of deserted villages, the urgent efforts to safeguard with herbs and prayers, the surprising shifts as workers suddenly found their voice. The key change, you explain after hours of discussion, wasn't something you could see. It was in how people began to view authority, what they believed was achievable, and their own value. The scholar nods and writes quickly, confirming what others have said. The plague didn't only take lives, it took away certainties. From that loss, new ideas emerged, you add. Once the scholar departs, vowing to inform you when his work is finished, you can't help but think you might not be around to witness it. You ponder this unusual position you've taken on, acting as a link between different times, holding on to memories that might otherwise fade away. That summer, you receive news that would have surprised your younger self. The son of a former serf from a nearby village has been chosen for a university faculty role. Making such a jump across social lines would have been almost unthinkable before the plague changed everything. You can find similar tales all over Europe. The strict feudal system is still around, though not as strong as it once was. Nobility still exists. Wealth still concentrates. Power still corrupts. The system has opened up more, allowing talent initiative to rise above where one starts in life. Travelers share stories that show similar trends across Europe, even if there are some differences in each area. In England, the official end of serfdom is on the horizon. In Italy, city-states thrive with new ways of governing. In Germany, technology is advancing quickly, especially with Gutenberg's creation of movable type printing, which will soon change how knowledge is shared. However, the world after the plague isn't perfect. New challenges have appeared with new opportunities. The conflict between England and France has grown stronger. Religious disputes are brewing. Economic inequality continues to exist, though it takes on various shapes. The plague comes back from time to time, but never with the same destructive power as the Black Death. Still, the path ahead appears obvious. The medieval world, with its strict rules and accepted customs, has transformed into something more lively, more receptive to change and new opportunities. As winter arrives in 1412, you feel your own time drawing near. Your family comes together around you. 3 generations have come from you and Agnes, who left us 5 years ago. Your youngest great-grandchild asks once more about the world before the sickness arrived. You gave a faint smile. It was another time, kid. Simpler in some ways, but also clearer. People hardly doubted where they belonged or what they were meant to do. The church had answers for everything, from the stars in the sky to what happens after life. Lords were in charge, peasants followed, and not many thought about other possibilities. Then an older grandchild asks, "You take a moment to think?" Then everything felt uncertain. If half of humanity could disappear in just a few years, what other unlikely things might become real? If a peasant could ask for pay like a craftsman, what other social norms might shift? If prayers and sacrifices couldn't halt the disease, what other powers might be challenged? You cough and someone hands you water. After you drink, you carry on. The plague didn't just take lives. It shattered a way of thinking. And from that death came new life. The word floats in the air. New life, or in Italian, Rinascita. Future generations would name it the Renaissance, understanding that a significant change had occurred in European thought after the plague years. As winter sets in, you sense your strength fading. Your family stays by your side, a comfort that many plague victims never experienced. In clear moments, you offer your last thoughts and guidance, trying to condense a life lived between 2 worlds into insights for your descendants to hold on to. The plague revealed life's fragility, you say, but also its value. It demonstrated that authorities can falter, yet communities can persist. It showed how exposed we are to things we can't control, but also how we can start anew and think differently. On a chilly February morning in 1413, you quietly pass away. A soft ending that stands in stark contrast to the chaotic horror of the plague deaths you saw years before. Your family feels sadness, but also joy for a life that covered the darkest times of humanity, and the light that came after lay you to rest with Christian ceremonies and some modern humanist touches, featuring readings from ancient philosophers mixed with biblical verses that honor both spiritual and worldly knowledge. Your grave marker has a straightforward inscription, a reminder of both an end and a new beginning. In the years that come after your departure, the Renaissance picks up speed. Brunelleschi finishes his groundbreaking dome in Florence. Gutenberg improves his printing press, making knowledge accessible like never before. Columbus journeys west, broadening European perspectives both literally and figuratively. Artists such as Leonardo and Michelangelo produce works that honor human potential and divine glory. These advancements do not erase the pain of the Black Death. In fact, many arise directly from it, stemming from the questions it raised, the opportunities it created, and the beliefs it broke apart. The plague showed how delicate humanity can be, yet it also highlighted our strength. It revealed our vulnerability, but also our ability to create. Thus, the legacy of the plague is filled with contradictions. From one of history's worst disasters came some of its most beautiful achievements: the Renaissance, the Reformation, the scientific revolution, the slow decline of feudalism, and the emergence of democratic governance. Right now, as you relax in your cozy modern bed, made with clean materials and thoughtful design, you are living in a world influenced by these changes. The path from the struggles of the medieval era to the ease of today unfolded over many years of curiosity, testing ideas, and envisioning new possibilities for society. Black Death shows us that even the darkest times can lead to new beginnings. It's not that suffering is needed for progress, but rather that disasters can create room for new ideas and challenge beliefs we didn't even realize we held. As you settle in for sleep, you might find comfort in the cycle of life, where every ending brings a new start, where loss can lead to growth, and where the story of humanity keeps going, changing with each generation. In this ongoing journey, may you find peace, knowing you are a part of this ever-evolving tale.